Hello, how's it going? Today I wanted to take a look at a type of vulnerability which is common in APIs in particular. The MITRE Corporation, the ones responsible for CVEs and CWEs, who catalog vulnerabilities and weaknesses, they refer to this as, quote, improperly controlled modification of dynamically determined object attributes. That's a bit of a mouthful, so I'll refer to this vulnerability as mass assignment. So today I wanted to do a demonstration of this vulnerability before taking a look at the code to see what went wrong, and then wrap up by sharing some useful materials to help remediate or avoid these sort of vulnerabilities. Okay, jumping straight in, we can see that we are on a documentation page, Swagger-like documentation for an API. This is partway through a capture the flag challenge, and so I won't get into how I've gotten to this point, but we can see that I've now got access to test a whole bunch of API endpoints. This interface allows me to authenticate for the endpoints that require authentication. So if I do this, it will give me an authorization bearer token, and now I can use the authorized endpoints. Let's just check my level of privileges with the admin check endpoint, and we can see I am not an administrator. This interface just makes working with APIs super easy. You can see that it's a nice visual thing, but on the back end it's basically just sending a curl command with a GET request, sets the headers, etc., and sends it to the endpoint, and then just gives you back the response from the server. So I'm not an administrator currently, so let's have a look at what my user is. So I can get back all of my user's information from the server, and one of the things that stands out to me is the isSuperUser flag, which is currently set to false. So presumably if I can set that to true in the database, the API will treat me as if I am a super user. So let's see if there's any way for me to update that particular field in my user object. Now I can see that there is a edit user ID, and that seems like a likely thing to test. So let's have a look at how this is supposed to work. Looks like it's expecting just a single variable, which is profile, and a string set. So let's see what happens if we set that. The result is true, and so presumably that's worked and set my profile to test string. So let's have a look what happens if I change this to isSuperUser. Right, do the dumb thing and see whether it'll work. IsSuperUser true. And there is some sort of checking going on, which is telling me that it's missing a required field, which is the profile field. So it's definitely checking that I, at the very least, have the profile field and that it's set with a string. But it potentially might not be checking that I'm not also including other attributes of my object. So let's see what happens if I send it two different attributes. I get a response telling me true, which seems promising. And if I check my user details, let's see what the server's going to tell me about myself. And we can see that it seems to have worked, and I am now set as a super user. So let's just validate that that's actually worked. Here we go. I'm going to have to log out and get the server to reissue me with a new authentication token. authorization token, sorry. And now I've got that, I should be able to access the administrator endpoints. And there we go. I certainly can. So in this instance, it's getting a user flag and then having access to some file upload endpoints, which given this is a Linux server, can easily lead to code execution on the server. But in real life, this sort of privilege escalation can lead to information disclosure. Potentially an administrator is able to view any record, maybe able to dump the entire database, or any other sort of nefarious privileges that come with being an administrator. So there can be some significant damage caused by this sort of vulnerability. Let's have a look quickly at the code. I'm going to start by looking at the user object as it's defined. So we can see that they've defined the user, and these are all of the attributes that make up a user, including the isSuperUser. So the endpoints that we were working with, API v1 endpoints user, here we go, user edit. These will need to filter or provide some sort of control for the input that it receives before it updates that user model. But as we can see, there isn't any input filtering. So we can see that I think this is just saying if you're updating your own user, so it looks at what user the authorization token is for and making sure that the user that you're updating is the same user, then it allows you to update, and then it's simply iterating through the objects in the request and updating the user object off the back of that. So because there aren't any filters or checks, it's directly updating the user model, and there's no control stopping me from updating any of these fields that are available here. Hey, just a quick interruption from the future. I didn't show the Snyk vulnerability scanner results, and I just wanted to point out that code scanning will likely not pick this sort of vulnerability up because this stems mostly from business or application logic issues rather than direct mishandling of user input or errors in coding, similar to SQL injection or XSS, etc. So these sort of vulnerabilities won't necessarily appear in your automated scanning as part of your deployment processes, etc., and makes it, I suppose, that much harder to identify. And with that said, let's get back to the video. I'll take a look quickly. The Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP, has some great information available for developers, well, for anyone, to be honest. Most people, I think, are aware of the OWASP Top 10 Web Application Security Risks, but in 2019 they also started doing a Top 10 API Security Risks. And this particular vulnerability, mass assignment, is number 3 on their top 10 list. You can see that they've deemed it common, very easy to exploit, and there's a whole bunch of information here with examples and information about prevention. OWASP also does a cheat sheet series, which is actually really great information. And there's a cheat sheet specifically for mass assignment. This does a great job of explaining this particular vulnerability. It talks about the different frameworks that can be vulnerable to this. Gives some examples. So in this instance, it's a web form as opposed to an API, but same concept. You've got a user object, you've got a web form that updates it, and no controls over the user input handling. So it's expecting this data from the post request, but you're able to append additional data. This is worth a read if you get some time. Back in 2012, there was a GitHub hack using a mass assignment vulnerability. It's an entertaining read if you get some time. And now we're talking about solutions to this vulnerability, and they're fairly straightforward. Firstly, an allow list about what can be bound by a function, where you can allow only the fields that you want edited. The alternative to that is a block list, which is slightly less good, but still a effective approach. And finally, the use of a data transfer object. That's maybe not as obvious. As I understand it, a data transfer object is a intermediary object that can be updated by a function or an endpoint that contains a subset of the overall. So in this instance, there's a user registration object which only contains the fields that are intended to be updated, which are a subset of the overall user object. And then that is subsequently updated in the backend or in the database. And then they provide a whole bunch of examples about how to implement an allow or a deny list in a variety of different languages and frameworks. So some great information there. That's pretty much all I wanted to share with you today. Thanks very much for watching. Actually, just a quick thank you as well to Hack the Box and to the creator of the machine that I was playing with today, IppSec. But that'll be about all. If you have any comments or questions, please shoot me a message or leave a comment below, and look forward to talking to you soon.